As a certified financial planner and as a retirement specialist, I've had a front row seat to a lot of retirement plans, and I've seen some incredible stories of success, but I've also seen people make some giant mistakes. And I was reminded or thought about some of the mistakes I've seen people make when I read a Fidelity study that talked about a big miscalculation that the average retiree makes. So in today's video, I want to talk about that big miscalculation that most people make, but I also want to talk about some of the other mistakes that I see retirees make that could jeopardize their financial future. But first, my name's Kevin Lum. I'm a certified financial planner, and this channel is dedicated to helping 1 million people retire without worry. In the early 2000s, following 9/11, an official in the Bush administration had a press conference, and he said what keeps him up at night is not the known risks, but his phrase was, it's the unknown unknowns, the things he doesn't know that he doesn't know that he doesn't know. That press conference was seared into my young brain, and I think about that phrase often, particularly as I'm helping people prepare for retirement. The biggest risks we face are often risks we don't even know we are facing. So in this video, my goal is to highlight some of the mistakes other people have made so that hopefully you can take some corrective action. Now, for some of you, what I'm going to cover is not going to be an unknown unknown, but hopefully it will spark you to not only think about these mistakes that others have made, but also to think about how you can protect yourself from making the same mistake. So let's dive in. The first mistake I see people making is they underestimate their longevity. Now, I think I get more hate mail about running projections to age 95 than almost anything else I've done on this channel. But the truth of the matter is, unless you have really poor health or really bad prognosis, it's risky to assume you won't live into your 90s, regardless of what your family's history is. And when you are planning for retirement, it is much better to overestimate and assume you'll live a long life. That way you'll be prepared financially and you won't run the risk of outliving your savings. As you age, you become increasingly financially vulnerable because it becomes much less possible to go back to work. When you're 65 and something goes wrong, you could probably get a part-time job or go back to work. But as you age, the last thing you want to do is both be physically and financially vulnerable at the same time. And so by underestimating your longevity, you are opening yourself up to a significant risk. I would much rather you overestimate your life expectancy than underestimate your life expectancy. The second mistake people make is they underestimate market volatility. Investing for retirement is very different than investing for growth. Now, that doesn't mean you're not planning for growth in retirement, but you run the possibility of a sequence of return risk. Because in retirement, you are pulling assets out of that portfolio. And so if you have a market crash and are forced to sell into that crash, you could greatly decrease the viability of your retirement plan. So I did a video last week and someone replied, you'd have been better off having a less balanced portfolio and just putting all of your money into, say, the NASDAQ. And so I was kind of curious, and they're right. The scenario I ran was from 99 to 2004, so basically 25-year period. And so if you put your money into a balanced equity portfolio with a factor tilt 25 years ago, that was kind of what the video was about, and come back today, so it's been invested for 25 years, all equities, you would have about 4 million, 4.3 million, I don't remember the exact number today. If you'd put all of your money into the NASDAQ and come back 25 years later, you'd have $6 million. It seems like a no-brainer. Just put all your money into the NASDAQ. But here's where it gets really interesting. If you'd taken that portfolio, so you took $1 million and invested it in a balanced equity portfolio that I talked about that in video, and if you'd taken $1 million and put it into the NASDAQ and you'd taken out 5% a year, inflation adjusted, the balanced equity portfolio would have not only supported your inflation-adjusted withdrawals, but if you'd come back and checked your portfolio 25 years later, that $1 million would have turned into $2 million. But had you put your money into the NASDAQ and taken that 5% a year inflation-adjusted withdrawal out, you would have run out of money about 10 years ago. If you'd put your money in the S&P 500, you'd have run out of money about 3 or 4 years ago. That's one of the biggest mistakes that people make when they're investing for retirement. They think that investing for retirement is the same as investing when you're 25, and it's not, because now you are withdrawing money from your portfolio, because big portfolio declines early in your retirement can do lasting damage to your retirement plan, and you have much less time to recover your losses. And so to mitigate your risk, you need to diversify your investment. And it takes a much different set of skills to invest for retirement than it does for growth when you're younger. And few people realize how different those skills are, and they end up blowing up their entire retirement plan. So the second mistake people make is underestimating volatility, or maybe said another way, is they underestimate how different it is to invest for retirement than to invest for accumulation. The third mistake people make is they have no idea how much money they're spending. I can't tell you how many people I've met with, and when I ask them what you're spending, they're not sure. And that's a problem, because when you're planning for retirement or you're in retirement, you need to know how much money is coming in, but you also need to know how much money is coming out. And if you don't know those numbers, it makes it much harder to plan for your retirement. And so you need a way to track how much you're spending. Now, I'm not telling you need to budget. In fact, most people, you're probably never going to budget. I'm not great at budgeting. I know as a financial advisor, I should be great at budgeting. I'm not. So I'm not telling you should budget, but you do need to know how much money is going out. So I've started using an app called monarch.com. I'd used mint.com for years, and then Mint went out of business. And I think Monarch is the easiest of all the apps I've used. If you've used any of these apps to track your spending, you know that they're often glitchy. Various bank accounts and credit cards won't connect up, and they're disconnecting. Monarch is really unique because it has multiple aggregators. So instead of just one or two aggregators, often they'll use Yodlee or Plaid. What I really like about Monarch is I think they have 5 different aggregators. And so it is the first time I've ever been able to get all of my accounts connected in one place. And it's one of the best experiences I've had with a spending app. So even if you're not budgeting your money, at least you'll have a general idea of how much is coming in and how much is going out. And it'll make it much easier to plan. Fourth mistake is just being unprepared for family financial issues. Family financial issues are one of the biggest unknown variables that catch us by surprise. Unexpected divorces, supporting adult children, estate planning mistakes maybe that your parents made, all those can derail your retirement security. And honestly, there's no perfect protection because this is often coming from outside our control. Family issues are typically outside our control, but you need to have an open and honest conversation with your family about financial expectations and financial boundaries. If your adult kids need money, set some boundaries, set some expectations. But also, if you have aging parents, make sure they have a trust in place. Make sure they have a plan for long-term care. Because if you take some time to create some boundaries with some proper planning and some proper expectations, you can greatly reduce the impact of these unknown family issues, right? We don't know what these issues are going to be, but hopefully we can at least reduce the impact that they'll have on our own retirement plan. The fifth mistake I see people make is ignoring inflation. If I was to say there's one thing I want you to remember, it's that there is going to be another financial crisis during your retirement. There's probably going to be 2 or 3 financial crises. And there's a high likelihood that at some point there's going to be skyrocketing inflation. We just saw skyrocketing inflation recently during COVID. We also saw it 40 years before that, and the chances are we are going to see it again. When I'm building a retirement plan, I'll often do a stress test. And one of the biggest risks to that retirement plan and blowing up that retirement plan is unexpected inflation. And so you need to make sure you have a plan to provide a buffer and protection against inflation. And this is particularly true if you have an annuity or a pension, because most of those plans are not inflation adjusted, meaning your buying power is going to be reduced over time. And so if you're feeling great because all of your expenses are covered by your pension or by your annuity, but if there's not an inflation rider, there is a real risk that your plan kind of falls apart if we have runaway inflation. So you want to make sure when you're building out that retirement income plan that you have protection against inflation. There's no perfect way to protect yourself against inflation, but with proper planning, you can greatly reduce the risk. The next mistake I see people make is they underestimate healthcare costs in retirement. As we age, our body begins to decline, it begins to fall apart, and along with that comes higher healthcare expenses. And it's really important that we plan for these increased healthcare costs. And this is what I talked about at the beginning, that Fidelity study that talks about how people underestimate the cost greatly. The average American couple estimates that the cost of healthcare in retirement is going to be $41,000. But in reality, the average 65-year-old couple retiring this year should expect to spend an average of $315,000 on their healthcare during retirement. And even more troubling is that number has doubled since 2002. In 2002, it was 160,000. And so the chances of it doubling again in the next 20 years is highly likely. So when you're planning for retirement, don't make the mistake of underestimating for retirement costs, because so many people greatly underestimate the amount of money they're going to spend in healthcare and retirement. The next mistake people fall for is scams. And I just did an entire video on this, so I'm not going to go too in depth. But there is just a growing number of scams, and the scams are becoming increasingly sophisticated. So if there's one thing you could do to protect yourself against scams, actually two things. First, go watch my video where I go in depth into scams. But the second thing you could do is add a trusted contact to all your financial institutions. Because as we age, we become more susceptible to scams. It's just something that's going to happen. And so by having a trusted contact, if you do anything out of the ordinary, like you're asking to withdraw $100,000 and you've never asked to withdraw money, your financial advisor or that financial institution can contact your trusted contact, whoever you put down, family member or whatever, and just say, hey, your dad or your mom or your aunt or your uncle has just done something out of the ordinary. Is everything okay? Is this normal? And then if it seems out of the ordinary, they can check in on you. Otherwise, that financial institution or that advisor is not allowed to contact somebody else to say something seems out of the ordinary. But if you add a trusted contact, then they're allowed to contact that person. It's only the person you choose, but they're allowed to contact that person if you do something out of the ordinary around money, just to make sure everything is okay. The next mistake I see people make is failing to prepare for known risks. Right? I started talking about this video by talking about how I'm worried about the unknown unknowns. But honestly, a lot of us aren't planning for the known risks, right? We need to create a contingency plan and have savings cushions for high probability events, things that are going to happen, whether it be accidents or floods or long-term care needs. Right? These are things you know are a giant risk. And so you need to make sure you are prepared for these risks. And if you do, you will be much better equipped to handle them when they occur. Preparing for the unknowns lays the groundwork for a much smoother retirement. My dad used to always say that we should prepare for the worst and hope and believe for the best. And I've really taken that to heart. And I think that's a really good rule of thumb when we're planning for retirement. We want to have a contingency plan. We want to have a financial cushion in case something goes wrong. We prepare for things going off the rails, right? Because something is going to go awry during our retirement, right? For most of us, there is a 30 to 40 year time horizon in front of us. And we don't know what the unknown unknowns are going to be. But if we can prepare and create a contingency plan and a financial cushion, we are going to be in a much better place when that unknown unknown strikes. So the time for preparation is now. What I see happen all too often is people wait until things have gone off the rails, right? Until someone passes and there's no estate plan, or until there's an emergency and then they realize they don't have the proper insurance or whatever it might be. Proper planning doesn't erase the risk of making mistakes in retirement, but it greatly reduces the risk. And finally, one thing that impacts a lot of these categories is the way you choose to invest in retirement. And so if you didn't see my video on a better way to invest, you can go ahead and watch it now by clicking here.